Shatter Me is a 2011 young adult dystopian novel by Tahereh Mafi. In 2013, it was an Arab American Book Award nominee. Among the many 2010s YA books that suddenly rocketed back to popularity during the height of book talk, Shatter Me was one of the most mysterious ones to me. The summary came across as a little melodramatic with the whole, I have a curse, I have a gift, I am a monster, I am more than human, my touch is lethal, my touch is power, I am their weapon, I will fight back. The rest of the summary was intriguing enough. Girl with the power to kill with her touch is locked away, world is falling into a dystopia, whatever. But again, everyone was fucking raving about this book and saying how it was the best thing since sliced bread, so I figured I might as well take a look and see what's got everyone so excited. Juliet is a 17-year-old girl who's been imprisoned in an asylum for the last 264 days. We eventually learn that when she touches someone else skin to skin, she causes them immeasurable pain and eventually death if the contact doesn't cease quickly enough. Juliet witnessed a small child being pulled around by his mother in a grocery store and, in trying to help him back up, accidentally killed him when she touched him. This power of hers has caused Juliet to be shunned by most everyone in society, including her parents, who she says have never held her, kissed her, or shown her any affection, period. Juliet was additionally ostracized by all of her classmates except for one, Adam Kent, an abused boy who was nice to Juliet, albeit not really a friend. It is Adam, incidentally, who was one day added to Juliet's cell after weeks of encountering nothing but guards. There's no explanation for this from him or from the guards, and so Juliet just kind of copes, doing her best not to touch him. Eventually, it's revealed that Adam is a soldier for the Reestablishment, the dystopian government that's taken over, and oh, look at that, it's lore time! Evidently, the world outside of the asylum has become downright dystopian. Extreme environmental collapse has led to food shortages and erratic weather patterns and mass animal death, sending the world into chaos. A group called the Reestablishment has effectively taken over the remaining inhabitable land on Earth, which is apparently divided into 3,333 sectors. For comparison, as of this video, there are currently 195 countries recognized on Earth. The Reestablishment is apparently attempting to destroy the English language so they can control how people communicate and just pin it. We're going to circle back to that later. Juliet is brought to meet Warner, 19, who is the regent of Sector 45. I'm operating under the assumption that this is Juliet's sector. I don't fucking know. And son of the Supreme Commander. Nepo Baby Supreme. Warner quickly outs himself as a deranged stalker who wants Juliet real fucking bad. And I don't just mean her powers, which are useful for torturing dissidents. I mean, he wants her for that too, but also he wants to shellac her. Warner also wants Juliet to touch him, and this time I don't mean in the touch my tra-la-la sense, but in the sense that he wants to feel the intense, potentially fatal pain that Juliet's touch brings. Juliet refuses, offended that Warner wants to use her as a weapon. Naturally, he continues to pursue her. This is a militaristic dystopia, not like she can just walk out whenever she pleases. There is this absolutely bizarre scene where Warner gets Juliet to dress up in a super skimpy outfit. He then puts her in a room with a toddler in a diaper, and the room is full of traps, and this essentially forces Juliet to have to make skin-to-skin contact with the child to stop it from dying in one of the traps. At the same time, she's been given a luxurious room to live in with Adam, who is, by the way, immune to her powers for some reason. She can touch him without hurting him. Naturally, Juliet and Adam confess their love to one another in the conveniently not cameraed up bathroom. This is a YA novel. There's only so dark we can go on the sexuality end of things. And Adam tells her that they're going to escape soon, so be ready. A couple weeks later, after that weird incident with making Juliet dress up skimpy and accidentally torture a toddler, they manage to escape after Warner triggers a false alarm, and as they escape, Juliet realizes that Warner is also immune to her power. Juliet and Adam run through a radioactive zone until they make their way to the neighborhood where Adam's little brother is living. Adam's fellow soldier Kenji eventually comes knocking on their door, having escaped from the Reestablishment facility as well, and whoopsie, looks like the Reestablishment came with him! There's a chase, yada yada yada, Warner comes after them, Adam is injured, and Kenji brings them all to a facility where we eventually find out that this story is basically the X-Men we have at home instead of going out and getting the real X-Men. Juliet's basically a superhero, and the people at Omega Point, most of whom have powers as well, give her a bodysuit so she doesn't accidentally hurt anyone, and that's just kind of where the story ends. I have thoughts. Lots of them. And I'm not 100% sure how to organize them. I think we usually start with the writing in these, so sure, let's go with that. One thing I had heard about this novel before getting into it was the purple prose and really questionable metaphors. It wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. The worst of it is concentrated in the first half of the book, although choices were certainly made throughout it. One of the more famous examples of the purple prose and kind of weird metaphors comes from page 5. I always wonder about raindrops. I wonder about how they're always falling down, tripping over their own feet, breaking their legs, and forgetting their parachutes as they tumble right out of the sky towards an uncertain end. It's like someone is emptying their pockets over the earth and doesn't seem to care where the contents fall, doesn't seem to care that the raindrops burst when they hit the ground, that they shatter when they fall to the floor, that people curse the days that drops dare to tap on their doors. I am a raindrop. My parents emptied their pockets of me and left me to evaporate on a concrete slab. Oh, okay, so, okay. We're mixing a lot of metaphors here. She's comparing raindrops to people falling towards an uncertain end, except the end is eventually hitting the ground, so it's not really uncertain. I mean, okay, I guess you could say that there is an uncertainty as to what exactly you're gonna hit, but you're gonna hit something, so either way, it's bye-bye raindrop. Then she talks about how it's like someone's emptying their pockets of raindrops, which isn't a thing, because people don't carry raindrops in their pockets. If she had said that God was emptying his pockets of raindrops, I might have said, okay, clunky, but it kind of works. God is, according to some at least, a non-physical entity and supposed creator of the universe, so we could say that he's someone who could, theoretically, have raindrops in his metaphysical pockets. That could work. But it's just someone emptying their pockets of raindrops and not caring that the raindrops shatter or that people don't like rain. A better comparison here would be coins, or if we're going for something less valuable, lint, but those things don't shatter when they fall, and obviously given the title of this book, a person shattering as a result of another person's careless behavior seems to be what the author is going for. This entire thing is to say that Juliet was callously abandoned by her parents. I think you can understand why some people quit this book early on. This one passage just really sets the tone for what you can expect from the rest of the book. If the author put more effort into making Juliet come across as mentally unstable, I could have dismissed this as, oh, okay, she's not okay, and coming up with unhinged metaphors as a result. But Juliet is remarkably well-adjusted for someone who's been neglected and bullied her entire life, and also for someone who's been locked in a cell without much in the way of human contact for 264 days. Pin it, we're getting back to it. Another example of a questionable passage, really, quite literally is from the next page, and it says, I'm wearing dead cotton on my limbs and a blush of roses on my face. Adam's eyes scan the silhouette of my structure, and the slow motion makes my heart race. I catch the rose petals as they fall from my cheeks, as they float around the frame of my body, as they cover me in something that feels like the absence of courage. Stop looking at me, is what I want to say. This one's just a mess. I got the vibe of what the author was trying to convey with the raindrops thing, sort of. That one was messy too. But this one is borderline incomprehensible. Let me pull it apart piece by piece. Number 1, dead cotton is pointlessly redundant. Yes, cotton comes from a plant, and at some point, it is technically alive. But once it's clothing, it's dead. Describing myself as driving a blind car or turning on my emotionless lamp would be just as informative and poetic. It's a no-shit Sherlock moment. Number 2, you aren't in Adam's head, so how do you know he's focused on your silhouette? Additionally, I'm trying to picture looking at someone in slow motion, and it's kind of killing me. Looking someone up and down slowly is really only something you can achieve when you're really close to them. If you're standing further back, you can just kind of take in the whole picture all at once, or just kind of, like flick your eyes up and down from head to toe if you want to focus on a specific part of the person. I say this for those of you in the audience who want to get into writing or are writing. Think very carefully about whether or not the things you describe your characters doing are things that, 1, actual people actually do, and 2, whether or not those things are physically feasible given the situation that the characters are in. Number 3, I catch the rose petals as they fall from my cheeks. Okay, so I guess you're blushing. A blush doesn't fall from your face, but rose petals are associated with blushing, so okay, I do see a connection. But then we get into them floating all around her body. Is she trying to say that she's blushing from head to toe? Because that would make sense contextually, since she wants Adam to stop looking at her, and I guess it would explain why she's lacking courage, because she's embarrassed. Alright, I take it back. It's slightly comprehensible. But sweet Jesus, I had to put some thought into that before it made sense. I made this point in my Red Rising review, but the thing that writers have to be conscientious about when it comes to metaphors is whether or not your audience is going to understand them. In Red Rising, Pierce Brown described a group's fighting style as like a summer song. And I argued that this didn't work because your audience may not have a point of reference for what a summer song is, or if they do, it may not match up with what you're trying to convey. Sheryl Crow's Soak Up the Sun is a perfect summer song. So is Bananarama's Cruel Summer and Mungo Jerry's In the Summertime. Yeah, they're all about summer and sunshine, but the vibe of each song is different, and not all of them can be called graceful in the way that Pierce Brown meant it. Metaphors are at their best when they are simple or viscerally understandable. Saying that your cheeks are on fire when you're blushing, that works really well because everyone's blushed before and you know what it feels like. Even saying something a little more complex like, he lights a bonfire in my cheeks, that is not my best work, don't judge me, will still have the reader understanding that the character's cheeks are heating up because they're blushing. It's something that you can recognize on an instinctual level because you've experienced it before. Saying that there are rose petals falling from your cheeks and swirling around you is when the readers are going to start squinting and saying, what? Not just because blushes don't fall from people's cheeks, but also because rose petals describe the color of a person's cheeks, not the feeling of a blush. Rose petals are typically cool or room temperature. Their presence on someone's cheeks is not going to connect to the heat of a blush. If Tahereh Mafi had said something like, the rose petals fall from my cheeks to cover my chest, gliding over my stomach to land on my feet, it would have still been flowery, literally, but with the context of Adam staring at her and Juliet wanting to stop, the reader can more easily make the connection of, oh, okay, she's blushing from head to toe. It's covering her entire body in rose petals, which is the color of a blush. There are others scattered throughout the book here and there that just don't read right. For example, when Warner tells Juliet he chose Adam to be her guard, it reads, "Do you know why I chose him?" Warner asks, "and I'm run over by a tractor trailer." No, you feel like you've been run over by a tractor trailer. We're stretching the bounds of what counts as a metaphor here. The way this line reads has me picturing Warner and Juliet standing in a room only for a tractor trailer to come bursting through the wall and flatten Juliet. Don't get me wrong, there are metaphors and whatnot in this book that work. From pages 25 and 26, I only know now that the scientists are wrong. The world is flat. I know because I was tossed right off the edge and I've been trying to hold on for 17 years. I've been trying to climb back up for 17 years. Little redundant, but okay. But it's nearly impossible to beat gravity when no one is willing to give you a hand. This works. Juliet's world isn't a globe, it's a precipice that she's been knocked off of, and she's been trying to right herself mentally and emotionally all of her life, but being neglected has left her feeling like she's alone and trying to keep herself afloat. I get this. The metaphor is comprehensible. I understand it practically, but also viscerally, barely hanging on, feeling like you might fall in the sense of mental and emotional instability and struggle. Another one too, also from page 26. Yeah, she really does layer him up in this book. The moon is a loyal companion. It never leaves. It's always there watching, steadfast, knowing us in our light and dark moments, changing forever just as we do. Every day it's a different version of itself. Sometimes weak and wane, sometimes strong and full of light. The moon understands what it means to be human, uncertain, alone, cratered by imperfections. Again, it works. The moon is always there. We just can't see it during the daytime. Technically, the moon doesn't change, it's just our perception of it from Earth that does, but I still get the point that's being made here and it works. The writing isn't always like this throughout the book, but it's consistently purple prosy for a lot of it, and hey, some people like that. If you like purple prose, whatever, good for you. My main issue is whether or not the metaphors actually make sense without having to spend 5 minutes staring at your wall trying to figure out what the author's trying to say. As for the rest of the writing, like a lot of YA fiction, it's very heavy on telling and less on the showing. Juliet tells us things all the time, and very, very little is left up to the imagination, very little is left up for the audience to connect the dots. This is always a bit more jarring with first-person narration because it comes across like the narrator is turning to you and explaining their life story, despite the fact that there's no real reason for them to be doing so. Now, in utter fairness, Tahereh Mafi wrote this book 15 years ago as of the recording of this video. She was actually 21 years old when it came out. Also, she's married to Ransom Riggs, who wrote the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. I did not know that. My point is that I have not read any of her recent books, and there is every possibility that she has improved as a writer since writing this one. Christ knows that my writing as a 21-year-old is not what I would want the world judging me on today. So don't take this as me slamming her as an author. I'm just critiquing the book as it's presented to me now. I'll segue now from the writing into the world building. It was, in my opinion, poor. Like, really poor. I know, this is the first book in a series. I'm sure it expands on things in later entries. But here's the problem. If you don't hook me in the first book, then like hell I'm going to press on with the rest of them. And this book just did not hook me. So, to quickly recap what we know about Juliet's world. Ecological turmoil has caused the Earth's climate to become unstable, leading to dead animals and erratic weather, and as a result, food shortages. Okay, fair enough. Girls with the ability to cause extreme pain and even kill people through their touch are casually acknowledged as a thing that happens sometimes. If that happened in real life, this kid would be in a hospital or a facility ASAP while everyone tries to figure out what's happening to them. In this book, it's made clear that people know about Juliet's powers and see her as a freak, which implies that random kids having superpowers isn't the craziest thing in the context of this world. We know that Juliet went to school and to the grocery store, and that cars still exist and are available to the populace. Child leashes exist, parents can get divorced, and Juliet had regular access to books, which implies the presence of a library because her parents were neglectful and probably would not have gotten her books, I don't think. Also, the legal system still exists, which we know because Juliet talks about being put through it after accidentally killing that kid. All of these things are implied to function more or less the way they do in the real world. The reestablishment was in the process of taking over when Juliet was younger, and in the time since she's been incarcerated, they've taken total control. Juliet gives us a vague idea of what they've been up to, and God, do I mean vague, because she just generally tells us that they've suppressed protests and are trying to seize more power. We see Warner's behavior, and we could use that as an effective indicator that the reestablishment is fucked up because they allow someone like him in power, but he's just one guy. Also, the X-Men we have at home are literally building a resistance to the reestablishment in pseudo-secret. That's what we know about this world, which, in the broad scheme of things, really isn't that much. There's a clash here between the world the author is trying to set up and the one she's describing. As I mentioned before, Juliet's pre-asylum world is described as being relatively normal. She goes to school with other kids, they go on field trips, she has access to books, the legal system still tries people for crime and facilitates divorce. On the other hand, Juliet tells us that the reestablishment has been gaining power since she was a child, and now it's gotten to a point where these ambitious motherfuckers are burning books and think they're going to destroy the English language. Put a goddamn pin in it. I am coming back to it in a second. The author is, in one moment, describing Juliet's world pre-asylum as totally normal, save for the neglect and roguelike superpowers. And then the next, she's describing it as being conquered by a dystopian government in a world that is so fucked up by climate change that it snows randomly at certain points in the year. You have to connect these things, and there was so much opportunity to do so. You're revisiting Adam and Juliet's past. Show me how the reestablishment interfered with their schooling. Show me how it infringed on their personal lives. Show me how their parents reacted to it. Show me how it affected Juliet being pulled through the legal system after killing a child with her goddamn mutant powers. Additionally, show me how the wild climate change has fucked up their lives. Juliet goes to a grocery store. What does she see in the grocery store? What is normal to see in a grocery store in a world where livestock production is being so damaged by the climate change fuck-ups? Like, can you even buy meat anymore? Are people fighting over it? What do you not have access to? How is the population reacting to this? Additionally, like I said before, the weather is super erratic. Work that into it. Why, what do field trips look like when it can, hurricane out of nowhere? It's just not explored. Juliet tells us things, but we're not shown things. And I repeat, book 1 is the place where you should be establishing what world the characters are living in. Then you add layers to it in future installments. The narrative was so intensely focused on Juliet's private misery and her fawning over Adam that relatively little time is dedicated to anything that might flesh out the world that they're living in. This is a particular problem with the reestablishment. Say what you will about Match, The Selection, Divergent, The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, or any other young adult dystopian novels, but at least in those other series, I firmly understood what the people in power wanted and why they were doing what they were doing. In Shatter Me, the only real representative we see of the reestablishment is Warner. Beyond that, we only get a few remarks from Juliet and Adam telling us about how the reestablishment is taking control and doing stuff like burning books without really being shown how living under a dystopian government is affecting their society. And again, gotta throw this out here too, the climate change thing is literally a mention it when it's convenient and then never bring it up again thing. This is an issue because for any good dystopia, survival, or resistance story to work, I need to understand what the stakes are. If you give me something somewhat more familiar, like a man trapped in a room with a rattlesnake, a little bit of the legwork is taken out of it because I know snakes are poisonous and I know he'll die if he's bitten. But when you're creating a dystopian society and I barely understand what the reestablishment is or what it wants beyond being big meanie bad guys who burn books, I don't feel any tension. The sense of stakes is just gone. What does the reestablishment do to people who try to escape? What do they do to people who resist? Obviously, I'm not expecting a young adult novel to get too deep into the subject of torture and execution, but at least give me some idea of what Juliet and Adam are risking by running away. Oh, right, hang on. Let me circle back to the destroying the English language thing. So Adam tells Juliet fairly early on in the book that the reestablishment is trying to destroy the English language, which is definitely a statement. So if I'm being charitable, I can read into this and suggest that the reestablishment is basically trying to do a Big Brother and create its own newspeak, which was the abbreviated language designed to impair the populace's ability to express certain ideas or feelings in George Orwell's 1984. Except I'm not that charitable, and I don't think the author thought this through. Adam does not elaborate at all about how the reestablishment plans on destroying the English language. It is a one-liner thrown out there with no further elaboration. We know from Juliet that the reestablishment is burning books and otherwise being authoritarian, but I really feel a need to stress this. You don't need to know how to read in order to speak. So many cultures went without written language for millennia and operated just fine. So, I have two options to consider. The first is that the author wrote this line intending to convey that the reestablishment is trying to destroy written language, but she botched the wording. This would make more sense practically. Writing is a learned skill, whereas speech is naturally passed from adults to children. It's easier to damage a population's ability to read and write than it is their ability to speak. The second option is that the author wrote this line 100% literally. The reestablishment is trying to destroy the English language, spoken and written, and if you, as a tyrannical government, eliminate the English language as both spoken and written word, you've now botched the people's ability to communicate not just with each other, but with you as an authority. In 1984, the English language was not destroyed altogether. It was mutated into something new to serve the government and only the government. And I really need to kind of emphasize here with Newspeak that the thing that you have to understand about it is that it isn't 100% the changing of the words that people were using. It was a combination of that with an intensely dystopian government that was just looking over your shoulder 24 hours a day and monitoring everything that you say. There's a very big difference between the Big Brother that's depicted in 1984 and the reestablishment depicted in this book. Or at least I think there is, since I don't have a whole lot of information about about what the reestablishment is or what it does. The point that I'm getting at here is that Orwell's Newspeak within the context of 1984 would have been 100% less effective in controlling the population if he did not literally have cameras and microphones in every single person's home through which the government could then monitor everybody's speech and make sure that they're not expressing things that the government does not want them expressing. So, yes, you could argue that Newspeak is a form of destruction of the English language, I guess, if you wanted to, but it only really works within the context of everybody being watched 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the point that I'm trying to get at here is that it is really, even in a book as well written as 1984, the destruction of the English language is not an easy thing to do. And I bring this up for Shatter Me because this is one of the few specific examples we get of the reestablishment's evil, and it's so underdeveloped that I can't take it seriously the way that I took it seriously in 1984. It very much comes across as though the author is trying really hard to drive home that the reestablishment is evil, book-burning, dystopian bastards, but then she just doesn't really develop it that much later on. I also suspect that this was meant to be another opportunity to enforce that Juliet is a bookworm, which You know what? Perfect opportunity. Let's pivot to Juliet's character. I said earlier that Juliet is remarkably well adjusted for someone who's been neglected and bullied her entire life. Add to that the fact that she's basically been in isolation for the better part of a year by the time the story starts, and I would honestly expect her to be a bit more unbalanced, but mostly she's just nervous, shy, and doesn't want to be touched for understandable reasons. My core problem with Juliet is this. From when she was a baby, Juliet's parents have emotionally and physically neglected her. They're afraid of her powers and think that she's a monster. Juliet says outright that they haven't held her since she was a toddler. Her classmates also think she's a freak. She has no friends, everyone is mean to her, and eventually when she accidentally kills that little boy, everyone else thinks she's a monster and a freak too. And yet, Juliet is kind and compassionate and understanding. Adam dumps a bunch of examples on us. There was no room left on a field trip, so Juliet selflessly gave up her seat for another girl and received no thanks. She gave her lunch to another girl who was going through a rough time while her parents were divorcing, and Juliet received no thanks. She took the blame for another girl cheating off of her tests because the girl's father would have punished her, and Juliet is implied to have been beaten by her own parents for this. And of course, we have Juliet trying to save that little boy being pulled around on a child leash by his mother, only to accidentally kill him. And trying to save the little boy Warner forced her to torture, basically. Juliet is a saint. She's a martyr. And here's the thing, I wouldn't have a problem with that if it was interesting. Juliet has been shunned her entire life. If she was being good in a performative way, like she's doing nice things so that people will like her and stop shunning her, that would be interesting to me because it would open up the complication of being good versus acting good. Is Juliet being good because she is good, or is she being good because she's trying to claw her way into the good graces of those around her? There is a point at which, if I recall correctly, Juliet mentions being good so that other people will stop seeing her as a monster, which is valid, but explore that. How much of it is Juliet being a genuinely good and selfless person, and how much of it is her performing those behaviors in the hopes of being viewed kindly? I would also be more understanding of the Juliet as a martyr idea if we saw her struggle more internally with her sense of morality. If Juliet's thoughts were darker, but then Adam comes in and is like, hey, but what about all these incredibly kind things you've done? We would now be contrasting Juliet's perception of herself against what Adam has observed of her, and also of her actions that we witness in the book, like her trying to save that toddler. But there is no contrast. Juliet's inner monologue is that of a simple, innocent victim of the world, and her actions depict her that way as well. Everyone hates Juliet for things beyond her control, and not for anything she's said or done. We also don't really see too much in the way of dark or bad thoughts in her mind. You know, maybe thinking to herself, well, hey, maybe I'll act like a fucking monster because you all hate me so much. Because then at least we could go, okay, people on the outside don't see it, but we see that she's maybe darker and more complex than they realize. Her personality is innocent victim. Good people look past Juliet's powers, bad people shun and fear her the second they find out about them. This is going to seem like a weird comparison, and Lord knows I haven't seen it in years. I'm an old bitch, and I was watching it back when it came out in 2006. But if you're familiar with the anime Naruto, Naruto is, by and large, shunned and shamed by his community for having a fox demon sealed inside of him. But we still see classmates and adults who treat him neutrally or even nicely. They don't always want to be friends with him, they don't always treat him well, but they don't spit on him every time they interact with him. Furthermore, there are people who don't like Naruto who, over the course of the series, end up admiring him and treating him better. Naruto pulls the shunned outcast narrative off because it shows nuance. Not every person who dislikes or fears Naruto is evil, and the ones that do aren't lining up to kick him in the balls every day. Naruto's early life is hard. He's lonely, neglected, and acts out so that he receives some sort of attention, however negative. But he is, ultimately, a good kid who just makes mistakes and can't control the fact that he has a demon of mass destruction living in his body. And though it's cruel and stupid for people to treat him poorly for it, it's not the most unreasonable thing in the world for people to be nervous around him. The fox demon almost destroyed their village, and now it's living in Naruto's body. People are traumatized by the knowledge that the demon that almost killed them all, and in fact killed some of their friends and family, are living trapped in a young boy's body. The framing is the difference for me. The way that Juliet's suffering is framed is very young adult. The protagonist is the biggest victim in the universe, and the fear and hatred they receive is 100% unjustified. There is no reason to dislike her unless you're an evil bigot, and Adam is the first person to ever love her. Rather than add some nuance or shading to the situation by having Juliet be harder to like or making it more reasonable for people to be scared of her, we just default to the world is mean and Juliet is a helpless, tragic victim. Again, outcast narratives can absolutely work, but it becomes frustrating when it turns into a nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I guess I'll go eat worms pity fest with neither depth nor nuance. It's painfully clear that the narrative is aiming for the audience to interpret Juliet one way and only one way. She's a good girl who hasn't done a single thing wrong in her life intentionally. Something else I want to touch on here is Juliet's supposed love of reading and writing, which might be one of the only other distinct characteristics she has aside from shy outcast victim. She's horrified over the idea of the reestablishment trying to destroy the English language, and there's a quote, I can't remember what page it's from, but it's a favorite among fans of the book. I spent my life folded between the pages of books. In the absence of human relationships, I formed bonds with paper characters. I lived, loved, and lost through stories threaded in history. I experienced adolescence by association. My world is one interwoven web of words, stringing limb to limb, bone to sinew, thoughts and images all together. I am a being compromised of letters, a character created by sentences, a figment of imagination formed through fiction.
Girl, where though?
You give this flowery, passionate speech about how much you love books, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I just missed it, but I don't really recall Juliet talking about books beyond this quote, or the English language thing. She doesn't talk about specific books that she's read, she doesn't talk about general themes in the books she's read, and she doesn't talk about the characters or concepts that she idealized. And maybe most importantly, we never see her contrast her lived experience with the ones she reads about in her books. Shatter Me is 338 pages long. It took me, give or take, maybe 2.5 hours, 3 or so maybe to read. And in that time, it tells me that Juliet loves to read, that it's vital to her survival, but it fails to show me that. You know what does show me that? The 1996 movie Matilda. And yes, I know, visual versus written media, it's different, but the point I'm trying to make is that this movie went out of its way to impress upon me that Matilda is a reader, that she escapes from her neglected and loveless home life by reading. And then, around the 30-minute mark in the movie, she goes to school and makes a deep connection with Miss Honey over their shared love of reading. The movie did in 30 minutes what Shatter Me failed to do in 3 hours for me. Juliet says that she loves books, and then, again, to my memory, it's not really a thing after that. We don't hear about how she's craving to read a book, we don't hear about the things that she's read and how they tie into her perception of the world, and we don't hear about the things that she's read that have given her any reason to keep going on in an increasingly desperate living situation. Nothing. This could just be poor writing on the author's part. Sometimes an author has a complete picture of a character in their head, but then they forget that they need to put the work in to convey those character details to the reader. It could also be that Mafi was trying to put a personal trait of her own into Juliet, just meant to be a flyby fact about our main character, and she may not have understood that this is one of the few distinct things about Juliet that she's let us in on. Developing this aspect of Juliet's character would only have served her. The raindrop example that I gave earlier additionally highlights one other thing about Juliet's character and inner dialogue, in that it is extremely melodramatic at times. The language is very catastrophic. It can't just be, I blushed, it has to be every inch of my skin is blushing. It's not a few minutes pass, it's hundreds of thousands of seconds passed. It's not, my throat is dry, it's, there's 400 cotton balls caught in my windpipe. Very specific number, but okay. Again, there are some people who like this type of writing, but for me, it was way too dramatic. And as I said before, if Tahereh Mafi had put more effort into showing Juliet as being unstable, I could dismiss the odd, catastrophic language choices as a facet of that. Make Juliet more obviously mentally unsound, and then really ramp up the catastrophic language in the moments when she's stressed out or in danger, and I'd say, okay, she's using these particular metaphors and language to describe her experience because she is extremely not okay. There were a few times when it worked out, at least. When Warner puts Juliet in that skimpy outfit and starts ogling her, she says that she wants to, quote, rip up the carpet and sew it to her skin. A little bizarre, but I get the sensation she's going for. My final comment on Juliet is her powers, and all I have to say is that it really was a revelation to get to a point in this book and finally have it click that she basically has a version of Rogue's powers from the X-Men. Rogue saps the life from people that she touches without meaning to. It's totally beyond her control. So she has to constantly wear a full bodysuit and gloves to keep the people around her safe, just like the one that Juliet is given at the end of this book. I haven't watched the movies or TV shows in years, but I seem to recall the whole can't touch people thing was a major drag for Rogue's love life. Naturally, in Shatter Me, Juliet's love interest is immune to her powers, because convenience probably. I don't know. My overall feeling on this book was that it was boring. We are so intensely focused on Juliet's inner world, which is largely centered around Adam and being a guilt-ridden innocent victim, that we don't really get a good look at the dystopian world that other YA novels have, in my opinion, done a much better job in setting up. The book and story just feel so weirdly hollow and absent of interesting characters, development, world building, or just substance in general that I just really didn't enjoy it.